Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be discussing how the National Institute of Economic and Social Research have been commenting on Boris Johnson's plans to invest in the national infrastructure, but how it's not going to offset the negative impact of Brexit. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as part of the Conservatives' election promise, they said they were going to invest £20 billion in the national infrastructure. And this is designed to reduce the gap between the wealthiest parts of the country and the poorest. For example, although it hasn't been formally announced, it is believed that Boris Johnson is going to throw his backing behind the HS2 rail project, whether for good or for ill. His aim in this investment is twofold. First of all, to engage with the North of England towns who gave him his majority last year. He'd quite like them to do that again in a few years' time. And secondly, to try and offset the damage to the economy that is coming with Brexit. After all, people are only going to look at the overall state of the economy if they look at anything at all. And if you do something that's very damaging to the economy, but then you do something that has a positive effect on it, and they cancel out, you get to say that actually Brexit was fine. Even though some people could still say, but if you hadn't done Brexit and you'd have done this as well, we'd have had a really good boost to our economy. But that's not how it's going to work in the public eye. But it does highlight the fact that because Boris Johnson is doing it and he's doing it for this reason, it shows that the Conservatives do understand that investing in the infrastructure of a country helps the economy grow. And you have to wonder, therefore, why they've not been doing it for the past 10 years. You know, why they've actually been cutting investment in favour of funneling money out of the country into offshore accounts of their friends and donors. But still, regardless of motivation, increased investment in infrastructure, from my point of view, certainly is going to be welcomed. I'd certainly support a good policy, even if it's motivated by nefarious intentions. Of course, there is the issue of competency. I mean, investing a certain amount of money doesn't guarantee a given return. It's not like, well, you invest £20 billion and you'll get this much back. If they spend it on products that don't give the best return, then the positive impact on the economy is, of course, going to be lessened. In addition, if you invest it in projects that are going to result in a disproportionate amount of that funding going into a small number of hands, as opposed to benefiting more people with extra jobs and all the rest of it, then the number of actual voters who are going to get any benefit from this is in doubt. But the National Institute of Economic and Social Research have said that Johnson's plans would only have a very modest impact on UK productivity levels. Levels that they describe in their own words as dismal. So you'd imagine that it should be relatively straightforward to raise them significantly. After all, it's always easy to make a big improvement from a low base. They also said that it would take a decade for the benefits to really be seen. I mean, that's the thing with investment. That's particularly the thing with national infrastructure projects and the problem with selfish politicians. Too often, particularly Conservative politicians, are concerned only with being elected the next time round. That's all they're focused on. That means that they often ignore the need to invest in infrastructure that will benefit the future, because they'll be landed with the costs, but they don't get any of the credit because the benefits aren't going to come until later. They're only interested in short-term projects. Invest now to get a return in time for the next election. Otherwise, forget it. That is the basis on which they will judge whether they're going to approve of a project or not. Are we going to see the benefits for the next election? No? Forget it then. They're not going to be clobbered about expenditure that earns credit for whichever bugger nicks their seat in 10 or 20 years' time. So Johnson's plans are expected to boost the economy by no more than 0.5% of GDP. Although at the moment, that would be quite a big boost to the economy. But that is only in the long term. But although 0.5% growth would be really good now, compared with what is it at the moment, 0.3%? The problem is that Brexit, on the other hand, is going to cost 3 to 4% of GDP. So that's going to completely swallow up the impact of this investment. And that's not even considering the very hard Brexit that many of us believe Johnson is actually going for. This is based on us getting at least a loose deal with the EU that allows us to have some sort of credible system of trade. The think tank noted that companies already have shortages in the workforce, and that's something to bear in mind. We already don't have enough people to do the jobs that are already underway. And this is the thing with promising money for this, that and the other. People will go, oh, he's promising £20 billion of investment in infrastructure. We don't even know. I mean, that's not even that much, really. But okay, it's something. But then you think, so who's going to do this work then? Where are the people who are going to do it? If we don't have enough people already, how are we going to do all these extra projects? You know, so that £20 billion worth of new projects is going to run into problems that Boris Johnson is not facing up to. We have a skill shortage in the country that has existed since I was a teenager. It's all right saying, oh, we've got all these unemployed people. That's a downside. That is a downside, something like this. They can't just come along and do these jobs. You know, the average age of engineers in the UK has been increasing ever since I was a teenager. And because you've got fewer and fewer being trained up for these sorts of jobs, but they keep retiring. And it's obvious enough, if you want a strong manufacturing economy, you have to constantly invest in it. You can't have governments who ignore infrastructure for a whole decade and then expect the workers to be there all experienced and trained and ready to go when you decide to splash out on a few projects now and then. And it's not even like we can import that expertise as easily now. We're making foreign workers feel about as welcome as a fart in a wetsuit. You know, they also notice, as did economists before the general election, that Boris Johnson's spending plans were not even credible given other things he said. They said that he's not going to be able, or specifically the Chancellor they're saying, Sajid Javid, but really this is all coming from Boris Johnson, not going to be able to make good on those spending promises without either breaking spending rules or raising taxes. Well, of course, the government wants to reduce taxes, not even just keep them the same, which is bad enough in terms of delivering on these spending promises. They want to actually reduce them. And the Conservatives aren't really one for the rules, particularly Boris Johnson. But those rules exist to give a safety valve for the country. So you break them and you're putting the country in very serious risk. This is very much like, for those who follow football, what happened to some clubs when they overspent on the assumption they were going to stay in the Premier League, and then when it didn't happen, and that's the problem that we're going to have in the country if these spending rules are broken. We're assuming, or Boris Johnson, the government is assuming, rather more growth in the post-Brexit period than is actually going to happen, which means we'll be sailing very close to the wind and then find ourselves dropping off the edge of the world. So anyway, hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, and if you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.